If you recently inherited a property and you're trying to figure out the best way to handle it, there's an assumption most people in your position are carrying right now that's worth examining before you go any further. The assumption is this: the property is in good condition, so the path forward is straightforward. Find an agent, list it, let the process handle the rest. That assumption feels reasonable. It also leads more inherited property sellers into a process that wasn't built for their situation than almost anything else. Here are 5 characteristics that tell you your situation may not be the right fit for a traditional sale, even when the property itself is in perfect condition. Characteristic 1. You're already feeling that the financial situation needs to change soon, and you don't have 5 to 6 months to wait. Most sellers don't realize how much time the traditional process actually consumes before they're inside it. Listing preparation alone, assessing condition, coordinating any work that needs to happen, photography, getting the property market ready, typically runs 4 to 6 weeks for an inherited property where the heir isn't local and needs to coordinate access. Then the property goes to market, then offers come in, get negotiated, move into inspection periods and financing contingencies, then closing. A clean traditional sale, when everything goes well, runs 60 to 90 days from listing to close. Add preparation time, and you're looking at 4 to 6 months from where you are right now to a closed transaction. Every one of those months costs you something: property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance on a property that isn't generating anything. If the financial situation already feels like something that needs to move, that feeling is worth paying attention to before you choose a process with a built-in timeline that long. Characteristic 2, there are other family members who have a stake in this property. Here's what this looks like in practice. You're ready to move, someone else needs more time. A third person has a different number in mind for what the property is worth. A fourth hasn't fully processed what letting it go means yet. Nobody is wrong. But the traditional process doesn't have a mechanism for any of that. It needs a clean, aligned path to a decision. And it moves at the pace of whoever is slowest to get there. What happens in the meantime? The property sits, carrying costs accumulate, conversations that were already difficult get heavier as the financial pressure builds. And by the time the family reaches alignment, the original options have quietly shifted. A traditional agent's job is to find a buyer and close a transaction. Managing the dynamics between multiple heirs who are grieving, disagreeing, and operating on different timelines, that's genuinely outside the scope of what the traditional process was designed to handle. And here's what all of these characteristics have in common so far. They're not about the property, they're about the situation surrounding it, which is exactly what the traditional process was not built to account for. Keep that in mind as we go through the remaining 3. Characteristic 3, you have no desire to become a landlord. Some inherited property sellers land here. They're not ready to sell. The carrying costs are real, and renting feels like a middle option that buys time while the bigger decision gets made. It's worth knowing what that middle option actually involves before deciding it's the right bridge. Tenant screening, lease agreements, late rent calls, maintenance requests at times you didn't plan for, legal obligations as a landlord that don't pause because you're still figuring out what you want to do with the property long term. And the carrying costs don't go away just because someone is living there. They restructure, but they don't disappear. For most inherited property sellers, people who didn't choose to be in this situation in the first place, renting doesn't reduce the weight of it. It exchanges one set of ongoing obligations for a different, more demanding one. If none of that appeals to you, renting isn't a middle option, it's a different problem. Characteristic 4, you don't live near the property or you don't have the bandwidth to manage a sale from a distance. Think about what coordinating a traditional sale actually requires from you when you're not local. Every showing needs to be arranged. Someone needs to have access to the property. If something comes up during the listing period, and something always does, someone needs to be available to handle it, either in person or through a network of local contacts you may not have. Every phone call with the agent, every piece of feedback from buyers, every negotiation update lands in your day, regardless of what else was already in it. For a seller who lives nearby and has flexible bandwidth, this is manageable. For someone managing this alongside a full-time job, a family, and the other realities of life that were already in motion before this property came into the picture, the coordination cost is real, and it doesn't show up on any closing disclosure. It shows up in the months of your life that the process consumes while you're trying to move it forward from wherever you are. Characteristic 5, you want the resolution to feel right, not just financially, but in terms of what this situation actually represents. This one is harder to quantify. It's also the one most sellers feel most privately and say least often. Inherited property sellers are not just sellers, they're handling something that carried meaning for someone who is no longer here. The responsibility of resolving it correctly, not just profitably, but correctly, is real. And it shapes what the right path forward actually looks like in ways that a purely financial calculation doesn't capture. A traditional sale is a public process, strangers walking through a property that used to be someone's home. Offers that feel low relative to what the property meant, not just what it's worth. Negotiations that can feel transactional in a situation that is anything but. For some sellers in your position, a faster and more private resolution, one that doesn't require the property to sit on the open market for months, absorbing the opinions of buyers who have no context for what it was, matters beyond just the timeline. It matters because of what honoring this situation actually requires. Now, here's what's worth seeing across all 5 of these characteristics together. None of them are about condition. None of them are about price. Every single one is about the situation surrounding the property, the timeline you're actually on, the people involved, the bandwidth available, the weight of what this represents. The traditional process is designed around the property. It assumes the situation around it is straightforward. For inherited property sellers, that assumption almost never holds, which means before you commit to a path, the most valuable thing you can do is understand what all of your options actually look like, not just the traditional one, and what each one costs in time, certainty, and control given the situation you're specifically in. There's a resource linked below that does exactly that. It walks through every option available to you as an inherited property seller, side by side with the real trade-offs of each one named clearly, so that whatever you decide, you're deciding with the full picture in front of you. No pressure to do anything with it today. It's there when you're ready.